Sit wherever you like. We'll change your touch.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And we appreciate you all coming this afternoon. Thank you so very much. This is going to be an exciting day. We have some special guests here, and we also the Lieutenant Governor wants us to get a little rapid, so we are not going to do that today. I've had enough of those phone calls in the last 2 days. That we're going to be very professional and informative. Please, let's be respectful to one another in the conversation that we're going to have. It's going to be an honest conversation to open up the next 400 years. So thank you again for coming. We appreciate it. For those of you all that do not know who I am not Roland Martin. I am graduate over around the shore here in the city of Richmond. And again, we appreciate you all. Hope you have a great evening. At the end of this, we actually do have food. I'm very appreciated. And again, thank you all so much. This is going to be a great day.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all so much for coming out on this very important occasion. It is wonderful to see so many community leaders and people who are focused on justice here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and in our nation. I'd like to thank the Sheriff, Antoinette Irving, has done a tremendous job in helping to organize this and hosting this. Can we please give her a round of applause? I want to thank the amazing staff here, the Sheriff's Office. Also, I see that we have the Commonwealth's Attorney, who's a great leader here in Richmond. She is doing tremendous work in Richmond, and we're grateful for her support. And before I introduce our extraordinary group of panelists, who we are pleased and privileged to have with us today, I wanted to introduce you all. Really many of you know him already, but we were so excited and happy when our moderator agreed to be with us here in Richmond. He has been just in the last 24 hours in Buffalo, South Carolina, Washington, D.C., and now in the great city of Richmond. Roland Martin is an extraordinary leader here in the media. He also will be live streaming this on his platform, so you're going to have about 2.5 million of your closest friends watching this today. So just know that we're going to reach people all across this country with the message that we are putting forth here today. So I want to recognize Roland Martin, who's an extraordinary leader. Thank you for being here. So as mentioned, we are going to have a very candid and open conversation that I hope will be very fruitful as well. We've called this the Next 400 Years Justice Summit for a reason. Last year we commemorated 400 years since the first meeting of the General Assembly of Virginia, which met Jamestown in 1619. And I now have the privilege of presiding over the Senate of Virginia as Lieutenant Governor. And this year marks the first year of the next 400 years in Virginia and in America. And what that means is that we have the opportunity to chart a very different course than we have taken in the past. We can now look in the mirror at some of the worst aspects of our history. The issues around racism and sexism, racial disparities, socioeconomic injustice. The things that we now see in our criminal justice system are often symptoms of a much larger problem. And the way that we confront that, the way that we overcome it, the way that we rise above it, is that we have that honest conversation and that we commit ourselves to taking action so that we all have the opportunity to rise together as a community, no matter where everyone comes from, the color of their skin, where they're born, what God they pray to. We want you to have a shot at the American dream, and for each of our communities to have the opportunity to rise. So that's what this conversation is about. It's about healing, changing, and rising together. And so I would like to, as we get this conversation started, introduce you to our extraordinary panelists. You'll hear more about their backgrounds, and we'll distribute some information. But they really are the best of the best when it comes to this kind of conversation. First, I'd like to begin with on our left, Secretary Brian J. Moran, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. Let's give him a round of applause. For serving his second term in that role, so really has done extraordinary work in 2 administrations. Also, an incredible leader, Director Valerie Boykin of the Department of Juvenile Justice Services. You will hear about some of the tremendous work she has done with our juvenile population. It's really groundbreaking work that we want to lift up and build upon. Harold Clark, let me tell you a little something about him. This man has been a director, not just here in Virginia, but in Nebraska and in other places around this country. He is one of the foremost experts on correction and rehabilitation in this country. He's been one of the most innovative leaders when it comes to correction. So we are grateful that he is leading the Commonwealth's effort and grateful to have him here. Harold, thank you so much. Dr. Kalina Nichols Fairfax of the Norfolk State University, behold, the way to go. And despite her last name Fairfax, she doesn't claim me, but I claim her. She's a member of my family, and one of the best leaders that we have in this nation around justice issues, and also helps to lead the state board here, and we are so thankful for all of her vision, her courage. She is fearless, and she's also from Richmond. Her mom's a great pastor. Dr. Meg Carr, we reached out to her. We're very hopeful that we can get her. She is one of the top national strategists and leaders around media issues, political advising, and corporate strategy. And she has a passion, I think her real passion in life for all of her success is around justice. And so we thank you for being a leading voice in this nation, and we're so grateful to have you. Dr. Meg Carr, let's thank her. Shannon Taylor might collect each and another tremendous Commonwealth attorney. Shannon, of course, from Henrico County, also spent time here in Richmond and the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District, where I used to practice as a federal prosecutor, an incredibly progressive prosecutor, one of the leading voices around criminal justice reform in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Shannon, thank you for all that you do. Let's give Shannon a round of applause. And last but certainly not least, Jonathan Jackson, who, again, as you may know the last name, is the son of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, but an incredible leader in his own right. He's the national spokesperson for the Rainbow Push Coalition, an extraordinarily successful businessman, but also someone, again, who has a heart and a passion for justice, one of the leading voices for social justice in the United States of America. And we were grateful that he flew all the way down from Chicago, New York, where he was doing business and decided to be with us here today. It really is a special privilege to have him. So Jonathan, thank you and your family for all you do. And so without further ado, again, thanking each and every one of you for what you're adding to this conversation and to what we hope to do over the next 400 years to change and to help Virginia be a leader rather than a follower in the issues of justice facing this nation. I give you Roland Martin, your moderator for today.
I certainly want to thank Lieutenant Governor Fairfax for hitting me up. trying to chase me down like a bill collector to be here. So I'm certainly glad to be here with all of you. There are several areas we're going to cover, and so this is going to be take this off. It's going to be actually back and forth conversation. It's going to be, as we fully expect, to be quite engaging. Also, we will take your questions as well, and so I'll let you know exactly how that is going to go. I'll start off this way. When we talk about this whole issue of criminal justice reform, mass incarceration in this country, so much attention is focused on Washington, D.C., but the reality is, if you look at the more than 2.3 million people who are in prison, it's only 10% on the federal level. So the reality is, when you talk about mass incarceration, you really are talking about a state and a local level. If you had to assess in this state, you had to grade it A through F, A, B, C, D, F, in terms of its job in terms of limiting mass incarceration, but also having real rehabilitation. How would you grade the state? Anybody? Microphone up there. You got a microphone up there. And so you're right there.
Good to,
We're going to start with grades.
well, good to be with you, and I appreciate Lieutenant Governor assembling us here. And let me start just by saying we would have started with an F, but I will tell you the grades are improving dramatically. We just had, we have 1 week left in our legislative session that began in early January, and it has been a transformative legislative session, and I can say that as one who has now experienced 20 legislative sessions. I was a legislator for 13 years, and now the 7th year as U.S. Secretary of Public Safety. The legislation that is going through this year.
Closer, how do you want me to do it?
I'll take it off the mic.
Take it off.
Take off. There we go.
The legislation that is passing this year has really transformed Virginia, whether it's from parole to driver's license to marijuana decriminalization, and to address criminal justice reform in the 1.2 million. Well, in Virginia we have just over 30,000, and Harold can speak better to
30,000 on the state level?
State.
Got it, go ahead.
And state prisons,
Got it.
not jails. But Harold can address that quick. But we really need to intervene early, and I would mention 3 things that I think will assist in that. 1, driver's license suspension. We will no longer suspend a person's driver's license for failure to pay fines and costs.
Praise the Lord.
So, and that actually starts the cycle, though. Really, you get suspended for running a red light, you lose your license, and then you continue to drive because you need to get to work, you need to get to daycare, God knows what else, the necessities of life, and you get stopped. And now, second, third time, you start going to jail for driving unsuspended. So it starts that cycle, that snowball. Marijuana decriminalization. Current law now is you can spend up to 30 days in jail for possession of marijuana. After this session, it's going to be punished by a $25 civil penalty. No record and no possibility of jail time. That's marijuana decriminalization. The third one is larceny. Petty larceny, we raised it from $200 to $500 2 years ago. It hadn't been raised since 1983. This year, we're raising it to $1,000. Now, why is that important? Because early on, somebody gets arrested for shoplifting, and they're looking at substantial jail time or felony conviction. And a felony conviction, I don't have to tell anyone what a felony conviction does to your record and your opportunity for education, for employment, for any quality of life. So I think, particularly in those 3 approaches, we will substantially reduce that prison incarceration. And so, grade, can we do better? We'll continue to be vigilant, and I look forward to next year and the year after. But I think at this approach, we're really improving our grade. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what exactly grade I would give it, but it is substantially.
You want to give it a grade, but you don't want to give it a grade.
It's not an A, but it ain't an F either.
So, please see it or B. What's the word? What's the word? Oh yeah, I don't go down the line, so you got to be prepared when I'm already.
I would argue that it's an F, and this is not to disparage anyone in this room. As a social scientist, I think we need to really look at this sense that jail and prison and or any correctional facility is normalized, particularly for one group of people, and I'm talking about black folk. I'm talking about black folk. I'm not talking about people of color. I'm not talking about minorities. I'm talking about black folk. The Prison Policy Initiative indicated that Virginia has an incarceration rate of 779 people per 1,000 people. This includes prisons, jails, immigration detentions, and juvenile justice facilities. This means that in 2018, 69,000 people were behind bars in the state of Virginia. So I think that we need to really talk about the thousands of people who are in jail, and then we really need to talk about what happens to people when they get out of jail. They are in a consistent state of purgatory. They are laundry list of rules, but they don't have no money.
That's right.
They don't have any clothes. They don't have any resources. Their families are already impoverished, and we know that public housing doesn't allow ex-felons to live there, so where do they go? So we need to talk about more funding at the community level for people who are exiting prison. We have great churches doing some strong prison ministries, but the money doesn't go to those churches. And yes, I'm a church goer, I tithe, but tithes will only go but so far. So I think we need to talk about what happens at the community level and why the money isn't going to the community, because people need to be developed, need to be redeveloped on a cultural level where they understand themselves and for who they are. So I'm sorry to tell you, but it's an F.
Oh,
Shannon.
So it's going to go down the line, so I have to keep it sure about the
So, I'm not going to waffle like the secretary and say it's not an F and it's not an A, but I'm also moved by what Dr. Fairfax said too, when she's recognizing not only are we talking about what's happening inside the jail, what's happening afterwards too.
That's right.
And that is our responsibility. That is part of the Department of Corrections, and that is in terms of reentry, and I think reentry has been a huge benefit. So when I heard you ask the first one, I was going to say B minus, but maybe if we look at everything, maybe it's more like a C. Because I do want to recognize the good work that the people in the Department of Corrections, I mean, let's look at also here, all of these men and women here in uniform. These are the people that we count on day to day when we're talking about people who are incarcerated. And we rely on the humanity and the kindness that they offer. And not only treating people the right way, but also having that level of humanity, but also keeping everyone safe. I mean, we're talking about people keeping safe from their colleagues, but also sometimes people get into fights inside the jail and want to keep people safe from each other. But one of the things I think we also need to highlight, Mr. Martin, I want to recognize my sheriff from Henrico County, Sheriff Lisa Gregory, who's also here with us today. And want to recognize.
But I think you got your winner with you.
I think part of the brief that I wanted to say real quick before we pass on is infrastructure. We talk about these jails and the counties and the poorest parts of this area. Not everybody has a lovely criminal justice center like the city of Richmond. Sheriff Gregory and I we're talking about it right now, because one of the issues we have is we have broken down buildings that nobody, regardless if you did steal something or did something bad, you shouldn't be in an environment like that. And we have to talk about the environment, because that has as much of an impact mentally on people when they are trying to be rehabilitated as it does on anything else. So that's where I see a big part there, which is the structure in which we are trying to
hold people accountable for their actions, but that second chance and rehabilitation is so critical. We've got to have the right environment.
Valid.
Thank you for the question. As Director of Department of Juvenile Justice, I'd probably give us a C. We have improved drastically on the work that we do with young people, but we're not where we want to be and where we need to be. So 10 years ago, we had 850 youth who had penetrated the deep end of our system and incarcerated. Today, I have less than 350. Less than 350 today, but that's not enough. Because, and we've done that through intentionally focusing on a major reform effort over the last 6 years. We've gone from 600 5 years ago to less than 350 today. But we still have an overrepresentation of young men of color, as Dr. Fairfax said. Mostly black, but also Latinos. We have both. And
What was the breakdown?
the breakdown at every decision point. I'm just going to be frank with you. Black children make up 20% of all kids in the Commonwealth. At the intake stage where they're coming in with complaints by a citizen or law enforcement, that number doubles, 40%. At the detention level, it goes to 55%. At the deep end, it's still 69% black children.
Got it.
So it is still not where we want to be. So we are implementing, very intentional processes to take some of the subjectivity away about how we make recommendations to the court. We're trying to develop a broader array of family-based and community-based services to address the need. But I want to say, I'm speaking from the system perspective, and going back to what Dr. Fairfax said, our grade is not great because it's not just the system that needs to respond, it's all of us. It's the communities that need to respond. We all have a responsibility to step up and do what we need to do to make sure the kids don't even come to my front door. So whether it's the churches, whether it's the neighborhood, whether it's the street organizations, in the back room, whether it's our sororities and fraternities, but we all have to own it. It's too easy to say the system didn't fix them. They should never even come into the system, and so I don't want to get on the foot there. But anyway, I would give us a C, but we need to continue.
Renee?
Yes.
Sorry, I was talking about the I do want to say, kind of piggyback to what everyone else is saying, we are focusing on fixing a symptom, but not treating the problem. And for that reason, I would say D. What I mean by that is you have jails because people are being put into prison because people are being arrested. If you fix the reason why people are being arrested, which may or may not be faulty or dirty arrest, which may be people being profiled based off their race or disposition or gender, or if they happen to smell like marijuana when inside the car. If you first start with cleaner arrests, that might lead to not even having to have as big of a budget or having a need for a great center for jails. Also, looking at it from a systems perspective, everything always starts because of something happening between human interaction. So if you have an environment where you are systemically being oppressed and not receiving resources, you may feel that I can't count on the county, the city, or whatever to protect me, so I will steal. I'll go out to what I need to get from my family, and for that reason, you may get arrested. So if you come from a perspective of let's fix the problem of having more funding inside the schools, therefore people won't have the need to steal, or they won't have a need to have drug-based crimes because they're trying to cope with traumas that are in their community because they are seeing rape, they're seeing trauma, they're seeing murder. When you focus on solving those problems, then you'll have a higher grade for justice because there'll be less of a need for that to even happen.
Good.
Good afternoon. Let me begin with the numbers initially. Secretary Moran was talking about the 30,000 offenders incarcerated in the adult system. Actually, we have right about 38,000, but the Secretary is correct in that 30,000 are within facilities operated by the Department of Corrections. The other 8,000 are scattered in jails across the Commonwealth for different reasons. Some are making their way to the department. Others are, right about 4,000 are in jails because the department does not have the capacity to bring them into the system. And so, and then others are in jail because they would like to be there to participate in work and use programs in the regions where they came from. But if I had to give a grade, I would give it a C minus. And I see members taking a look at everything, taking a look at how folks are coming into the system, taking a look at what's happening in the system, and then what happens in the community in reentry. Today, unfortunately, right about 59% of those incarcerated today are black. And that's a high number. That number goes back and forth in the last 10 years between 57%
20% of the state, almost 60%, 20% of the population, almost 60% of those incarcerated.
That's correct. And that number has been oscillating between 57 and 60% for the last 10 years or so. We need to work on that. And that's a problem at the front end. And that's why you have to take a look at the entire system. You can't give a good grade. Within the DOC, we are very proud of the work that a lot of folks are doing. We have 13,000 staff working hard every day. And we are changing the culture in the organization, because unless we work in that culture and change that culture, good things are not going to come from that operation. And so for the last 10 years, that's been a major focus in the DOC. So we have this lofty mission statement, but we have narrowed it down to a brief model, which is we are in the business of helping people to be better. And that's what we're training every correctional officer and others to be aware of. And so fortunately, not fortunately, but we have been successful in that for the last 4 years, we have had the lowest rate of recidivism in the United States. That number is 23.1%, and you're looking at a national average of about 42%, and the outlier at the top is 63%. So that gives you a perspective as to where we are.
What state at the top? What state?
Delaware.
Got it.
But we know there's a lot more work to be done, because as we are trying to re-enter folks back into the community, we are hitting roadblocks. We are not finding resources in the community to take these people. And so the problem is that a lot of work that we do with mental health, with substance abuse, and so forth, once discharged, a lot of the resources are not in place in the community to continue the work that we started within the system.
You mean from the state, so once they go back, now you're dealing with what's happening in cities and counties.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And so we have to take a look at the entire system to include community, the institutions, and what's occurring that causes them to come to incarceration in the first place.
Sure, how would you rank it? Sure, go ahead.
And I rated in reference to, or rated in reference to the reason why I ran for it. I rated it as an F when I came in. I rated it as a C as I've started to matriculate through this process.
How long you been sheriff?
I've been sheriff since January 1st, 2018.
Got it.
Simply because I'm born and raised in the neighborhoods of the individuals that I ran homes and supervisors and look at. So my goal is to make sure that the people that look like me are given a fair opportunity, for an opportunity to be able to be successful, to be able to go back out into the community and do the things that they need to do, and be able to go back home and be good parents and be good citizens, and be able to encourage other people that it's not about what I did to get there, but what did I do to get myself out of the situation after that. And what we've done here is our goal is to make sure we can put people back into a position to be successful when they go out. We've gathered over 250 partners that can help us to attract individuals once they leave out. We have gone out and got grants to ensure that we can give people the services that they would only have gotten if they go to the DOC. What we want to make sure is people don't get that opportunity to go to the DOC. We want them to get the opportunity to build on themselves while they're incarcerated right here in the city. We have a good relationship with our common fraternity and other diversion programs that we have to ensure that we can keep people from being incarcerated and they can still be productive citizens in the city while they're waiting to go to their trial. Because you keep having people that have to wait in the system to go to trial and they lose their jobs, they lose their homes, they lose their families. So our goal is to build people and put them in a position where they can do well when they get out. So right now, I think we're probably at a seat, and my goal is before I leave this seat, is to have us in an 8 right here in this city. What we do in the city will have an impact on what it is that happens in the state. and in the nation. We have to make sure that we're partnering with the right political leaders as well, and stop leaders from dealing with trying to surround themselves or smooth or socialize or build on themselves and build on the people that are incarcerated and people that actually need help. All the operators, the way they were using the people because people look like me. I've been in those situations. I'm a project kid. And I love being a project kid because I'm an example for the kids that are out there. So we want to make sure that ingrained in the system that we connect with the right community leaders who are in this room, and I see a lot of our partners in this room, that are helping us to help people when they get hurt, before they make that decision the next time, to do the same thing that they did before, because there was nobody to connect them with when they got out. What we do is we do everything while they're in, and we put them out the front door and say, go and do this. What are they going to go and do? They're going to go and do what they know, because they don't know any better. So if we don't put them in a situation to know that, they won't do that. And that's our responsibility here in the city.
You know, I would tend to the lower end historically. I think that we've started out at an F. And, you know, the only good news there is that there's nowhere to go but up. We have to take an honest look at our system.
That's right.
And we also have to be very honest in our dialogue. Let me say, I'm not really a politician. You all know I've been elected. I did get the most votes in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia from Lieutenant Governor, but that doesn't mean I'm a politician. I'm a regular person who believes that we have to speak truth to power. And the numbers that we're seeing reflected where African-American children are overrepresented by 3 times in the juvenile justice system. I think Director Roland is doing an extraordinary job, by the way, tackling these issues. Also the DOC, where adults are overrepresented by 3.5 times in that system. I think Director Clark is doing a great job addressing this. This comes from a legacy of slavery. And we have to be very clear about that. This did not start yesterday, it didn't start 50 years ago. This is why we call this the next 400-year summit. It was a long period of time where incarceration was not an accident, it was actually the goal. To have people be incarcerated. And so once we can acknowledge that as a people, I mean all of us in this room and in this Commonwealth of Virginia, now we can start to address the issue. People are not inferior based on their skin color. They're not inferior based on where they come from. I grew up in Northeast Washington, D.C. Sheriff, and you have a great sheriff here in Richmond City. Sheriff Roland, she's doing an incredible job. I grew up in Northeast Washington, D.C. We moved in the mid-1980s. My parents got divorced. So my mom moved us in with my late maternal grandparents. The height of the crack cocaine epidemic, we were the murder capital of the country, 500 murders a year. That's the environment that I moved into with my 3 older siblings and my then single mom. And we were able to turn that story around with the help of a whole bunch of folks. But it wasn't because the system wasn't intended to have us get caught up, it was because people found ways to get us out. And that's what we've got to, in my view, build around our young people and our families and our communities. Structures and systems that support them. It should not be when do you go to jail along your life, it should be you shouldn't have to go to jail at any point in your life. And we have to reset the expectations for our young people. So, Roland, what I believe, and I think there's been some extraordinary work being done in the halls of justice, there's way more to be done. We got to do more outside of these halls to prevent these young people from ever finding themselves in a position where they are faced with the consequences of actions that they should never have taken. And as I travel around the Commonwealth of Virginia, we keep in mind there are 8.5 million Virginians in the Commonwealth. When I go to communities where you see high incarceration rates among African Americans and others, you see an almost direct relationship and correlation to the lack of resources. I talk to young people in communities up in Danville, Roanoke, and Norfolk, and Virginia Beach, and of course in Richmond, and I'll talk to kids and I'll say, you know, why are so many of your young friends ending up, you know, in the system? Where do you guys go to play and hang out on the weekends? Where do you go to swim? Oh, we don't swim pool. Where do you go to the Boys and Girls Club? Oh, we don't have a Boys and Girls Club. Where do you go after school? Oh, we hang out on the streets. There's nothing else for us. And so what we're doing is setting these kids up for failure. This is a place where we are reflecting, we expect them to come because we give them nowhere else to go. And so we have got to reset the expectations for our young people. And they should not be walking in every day to crumbling schools that are over 100 years old. But we're telling them when they walk to those schools, this is how much we value you. We don't even understand a century take the time to invest in you and in your future and in your education. But you know what? We'll build a brand new jail. And we'll make sure that you have those facilities be state of the art. And so we've got to change our mindset that it starts at the very beginning. And so let's be honest with each other. And let's have these conversations in love and out of respect, but also you show respect and love for somebody by being honest with them. And as a Commonwealth of Virginia, we can start as the place that slavery in the Western Hemisphere was born, and then change that into the place that's leading us out of a slavery mentality and leading our young people into a brighter future. So we started with an F, but by God, if everybody knew what we're going to have a day by the time I'm done in public life. So, thank you.
The reason I wanted to start that way is I wanted to get a sense of where, first of all, how people saw this issue of criminal justice reform, mass incarceration. Because the reality is some see it solely as a jail prison issue. Others see it as a jail prison issue for adults and juveniles, as opposed to a much more broader issue, because if you go through the system, then you get out, then the question is, you're still impacted. What was made when it comes to not being able to get public housing. When that was signed into law by Bill Clinton, the Welfare Reform Act. But you also had, of course, the change where if you also were incarcerated, you couldn't even get student aid. Well, you can't go to college, you can't live somewhere, what the hell are you going to do? And so, from your perspective, traveling around the country, you also have the sense that because people now realize that these issues aren't just solved in the nation's capital and state capitals, now you're also seeing a different focus on people electing district attorneys, electing judges, because that's actually the beginning of the process when you talk about mass incarceration, not the prison system, it's the people who are actually doing the prosecuting. Your thoughts on that?
Well, once again, thank you very much for having me out here today. Sitting next to the sheriff, I want you to know I agree with everything you've said.
She got
So I was going to simply, being a professor, give the grade an incomplete to be neutral, but now that I have, I've been pushed on by what I would say the governor, I don't need correction, Governor Fairfax, and that's my opinion. And going forward, I would say that it's a larger societal issue. And I'm very, very familiar with Virginia. My mother's from the Tidewater area, Norfolk, and Hampton, and Newport News. I went to North Carolina A&T in Greensboro. My brother went to UVA. So I'm very familiar riding up Route 29 and being stopped in Lynchburg, Blackburg, and every other burg. Very familiar with taking Highway 85, and I've got multiple tickets in Bowling Green if those officers are here. That's another hot spot. But I would say I have to give it an F. And I speak from the point of pain that when you hear these numbers, and I want to translate those numbers into meaning, that our children are being locked up and arrested 3 times, 2.5 times. Some child is being detained right now that should not be here.
That's right.
So any minute you're in that jail, you're getting angry. You're getting upset and your life is forever changing. So I would speak in that regard. I appreciate all the people that are doing great work. And I want to say a very special thank you to the officers here. This has been a wonderful program. But we also have to bring the judges into this room. These children are over-prosecuted and underprotected. They have not been served. And what I mean by a new mindset, think of it. Everyone loves Chris. Everyone loves Raymond, and everyone hates Chris. This begins to seep down into our children's subconscious. When poor people do it, they're called that they are lying. When rich people do it, it's prevarication or misremembering, whatever that is. Then they tell you that poor people steal and rich people embezzle. This is at the heart of this financial crisis.
Or a lot of people get welfare and islanders get subsidies.
And the poor will lie, the rich will prevaricate. Come on, Mike. So we have to deal with the top issue. We also have to have this forum with judges in here. That the police in here and the sheriff, they have to protect and serve. They have to provide protection and they also investigate. They're not the ones bringing the charges. So unfortunately, this is the last stop. And what can we do to stop this? We should give these persons on the front line more resources. Can you imagine if there were more officers engaged in football and basketball and recreation and activities? I do know that most of these persons have a heart to serve, but they've been handcuffed, told you can only lock up people, you cannot let the children see you in a better light. I would say it's an F because we have to change the language. Every time I hear the term wrongful conviction, well, unless you've been in the situation, they used to call that kidnapping. It's not a wrongful conviction. You were innocent. You never should have been there. That mentality is coming from the shadows of eugenics that says if you had not done something wrong yet, you were going to do something in the future wrong. So therefore, you were just wrongfully convicted. That is racist to the core. Stop and frisk. That sounds like a TSA pat down or a foot massage. But not until you have the gun pulled on you and someone makes you stand out in the rain or puts you down on the ground, you don't understand how you get high blood pressure, living under constant stress and as a syndrome. And then the other part on biases, we need to move from beyond that. We need to go back to the old word, racism. When people are over prosecuting these children. And that's what's happening. Why? Because they see them as unworthy, less than. And the last point I want to make is on all these felonies. This is at the heart of America and the issues we have to confront. That's our citizenship birthright. You're making our children nomads. You're not a citizen of the country if you can't vote in it.
That's right.
For everyone that loses their right to vote, it should almost be an individual Supreme Court case. How do you let someone serve time and then tell them once they have repented, repaid their time, they're still not restored to full citizenship? And until we do that, our children won't feel at home, they won't feel empowered, they won't know how they can participate. So expunging all of these persons, and there's over 5 million people that are living with convictions, they should not have to be pardoned. They should have been pardoned when they finished serving their time.
Talk about judges should be here, but obviously what we also don't have here, we don't have anyone from the school system. So I'm going to get into the areas here. So in this state, first of all, how many people have seen, many of you have seen it, we talk about on Roland Unfiltered, the video of the 6-year-old black girl who threw a temper tantrum in that classroom, and the school called the cop, and they handcuffed her, took her to jail, and fingerprinted her. And there are a lot of people who were asking questions about that, because the previous week we had the young black girl who they admitted to a mental facility for 48 hours, and her mother did not know, and they gave her drugs, and many people were shocked that that was actually a state law. So here in Virginia, so let's talk about from a school standpoint, are there any state laws or legal laws that are similar to that? And from your perspective, when it comes to police officers and others within these schools, in an effort to get them out, because what you're talking about is really that school to prison pipeline. So from that perspective, what's happening in this state when it comes to schools and mass incarceration or police, things along those lines? Who can speak to that? Anybody? Go ahead.
Because I am in the thick of this conversation when it comes to Henrico County schools. And I mean, I do want to recognize, we have a new superintendent, Dr. Cashwell, and, she's coming in with a fresh pair of eyes, but I have, like my friend here in the front row, Colette McEachin, there are very few prosecutors who are getting involved in this dialogue, and I really feel like we have to be part of the conversation. And I say that because, and as, again, recognizing a lot of community leaders here, the conversation that always happens is that pendulum swinging of who is responsible for the safety of your children when they go to school. We have law enforcement officers, school resource officers that in the county of Henrico work for the Henrico Police. They are there to make sure that the children are safe. They are there to make sure that the staff is safe. That is their role. In addition to trying to develop positive relationships with children. They do not want to be called by the teacher necessarily because Johnny's having a temper tantrum. But at the same time, we have a teacher that's 5'2", and Johnny might be, 6 feet tall. And what are we doing to help the situation, right? It shouldn't be the police officers getting called. There's this struggle as to what we are expecting our school administrators to handle internally, to not bring in law enforcement, because it is not law enforcement's job to discipline children.
Well, let me do that. So if there's a disturbance in a classroom, you have a resource officer who's in the school.
Right.
Based upon their rules and procedures, do they then call the resource officer, or do they call the principal? What's their process?
It depends, because we let our schools, depending on what school you are in, what principal is calling the shots, there's no continuity along the road.
So right there, that's a problem right there.
That's a problem. We allow school boards make their decisions for their localities, and there's no consistency. I mean,
So let me ask the next piece. Okay, so let's say they call a resource officer. But let's say the school has a policy where fine, you have a disturbance in the classroom with a student, and it escalates, you call the resource officer. Do they then resolve it in the school, or is it their policy? Oh, we will immediately call outside. Call comes, call them, take them away.
there's nothing wrong with asking the officer to help remove Johnny from the room so the other 29 children can learn. Because we know the parents talk about that too, which is, my child has 45 minutes to learn this topic.
Right.
When Johnny's breaking bad and he's taking away 20 minutes, now my child only has 25 minutes. We want to be respectful of those parents as well.
Right.
But the problem is, once you remove Johnny from the room, where is Johnny going to go? We do not are talking about infrastructure. Where do we take Johnny to de-escalate?
Yeah.
There's no place for our children that when they are in the throes of having a problem, a behavioral outburst, that they can go and just chill out.
So the school district or the school, does it have, for lack of a better phrase, a calm the hell down room? I don't have biological kids, but I've raised 6 nieces. If I got 2 nieces who are fighting each other in the same room, I'm taking somebody out of the room to another room, and I'm like, calm your ass down. So I'm just trying to understand do they even have a room where they say, resource officer takes them there, an assistant principal or the principal comes in and talks to the student to call, do they have anything like that?
I asked, in speaking with our school resource officers and I go, I asked them, I said, for you all that are working, please raise your hand if you have a school that has a place where Johnny can calm the hell down. And I had one officer raise their hand, and we're talking about a place that's not the principal's office where everybody can walk by and see that Johnny's in the principal's office. And then I had another officer say, well, does the track count? I said, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna say yes, the track counts, because if Johnny needs to walk around the track to calm down, I'm good with that. But we have no place for these children to go and calm down, and then you compound that with expulsions and suspensions and having children removed from their learning environment when they had an outburst because Johnny's got a lot of problems going on in Johnny's life. There's trauma at the home, Johnny himself is being subjected to trauma. And we're missing so many points where we need to be connecting, getting back to this whole thing, resources, what are we doing to help our children on the front end? And so, everyone here, the people in this room have been and had those conversations with the people that need to be having the conversations. But we need to start seeing some actions.
Roland, I can piggyback on some of those comments, and it does, a lot of these issues do come down to resources and priorities. School safety has been a topic that we have been working on for a number of years, and frankly, Virginia has done a pretty good job with respect. We mandate threat assessments, so you have a threat assessment done in school, and that contemplates early intervention, recognizing a child in need and having resources to address the needs before something escalates into violence or
Oh,
something.
that's not good. Hold on, that's not good. You said we have threat assessments. I separate threat assessment from a kid acting up. So, what I'm trying to understand.
Well, there's a degree, obviously, but in terms of school safety and some of the issues that Ms. Taylor was addressing, we've done a pretty good job with respect to trying to intervene early. Now, with respect to the resources, she mentioned the expulsions. You know, our school resource officers come under Department of Criminal Justice Services and for training purposes. And we've really tried to address more training. And training has to not only be the SRO, but with the education community. Because they need to understand their roles. Because we do not, nor do the SROs want to enforce discipline in the schools. That is not their role and should not be. And so training is one aspect of it. Where that child should go, whether you call it a timeout room or something, there should be a school counselor involved, not the SRO. Now, again, prioritization of resources. We put money in. We have about a ratio now of school resource with school counselors around the state, about one child, 400 children and one counselor. The national average should be 1 to 250. The governor put money in to accomplish 1 to 250. Unfortunately, some of that money has been taken out, and in the legislature's defense,
Taken out nowhere.
been taken out of the budget and well, the session isn't over, so we're still.
Taken out, what are you trying to say?
Well, in their defense, we don't teacher salaries.
Got it, okay, got it.
Because teacher salaries right now in Virginia, despite us being the 7th wealthiest state in the country, we're below the national average in teacher salaries. So that should be a priority, to raise teacher salaries. And so we're still negotiating some of those issues. I think, again, underscore the need for resources, prioritize teacher salaries, plus school counselors, because that child should be going to a school counselor, not an SRO.
But please, this is I'm going to validate John. But please, this is what the problem is. If you're approaching mass incarceration and criminal justice reform from a 360-degree view, then you have to factor in, because the way in television we think about back time. The show starts at 6, ends at 7. We actually don't build the show at 6. We actually build the show at 7, and we go backwards. That's how I look at everything. So I'm talking about this very issue. I'm back-timing this thing, and I'm saying, okay, if I'm going to take it all the way back to a child who acts a fool in the classroom, and you haven't created a system to deal with that moment, and not let it escalate to he or she didn't want to shoot up a classroom. Not escalate to they get suspended or kicked out, and now they're on the streets doing whatever for 2 weeks. That to me is a huge flaw in the system, because if you're not dealing with that on the school end, you are creating all of these problems down the line over the next 12, 15, 18 years. So how would you advise to construct the thinking for these school districts in these school boards? Go ahead.
My position is that Virginia is Alabama with a suit. Virginia has a history of subliminal policy in every major social institution in the state. The fact that we have an example where the teacher is shorter and the student is presented as a taller, imposing, threatening figure is an example of how our children are viewed. I'm a product of Richmond Public Schools. I was bused to read and read because my family lived in Church Hill. I went to Woodville Elementary. I went to Henderson Middle School. I graduated from Marshall Walker High School. Richmond has a history of policies based upon how children are treated if they are black. now that they are minority, now that they're a person of color, if they are black. And the attorney is correct. If the particular individual school doesn't have persons there who see black children as children, they will be treated as such. The example you provided with regards to the little girl who was handcuffed, she wasn't seen as a little girl, because she's black. There's a book called Push Out. And what happens with children, black girls who are in elementary school, they are viewed differently. So part of the problem with schools is that we don't have black adults in schools who have major responsibilities and who are pulled in as resource people. We can talk about other things, but that is at the base of what happens in individual schools. If you don't have principals and other persons who see black children as black children and who then know how to interrogate, intervene, work with black children who bring issues to the classroom because of poverty, and we have yet to talk about poverty. Poverty is at the base of most of what we're discussing here. So it is just racist. Stop. It is just racist.
Just a couple of thoughts. I mentioned earlier how we reduced our numbers. We've even reduced numbers more significantly on the front end. So when school divisions or law enforcement bring us complaints, particularly from the schools, we are filing fewer and fewer of those charges. By the code, we have the right to divert those, and we can find other avenues to send young people to have those matters addressed.
Okay, so let's stop right there. So school comes to you with a complaint, and then you do what?
Our intake officer screens it, and they can divert it from the court system.
Divert it where?
Either to counseling outside of our office, or we even have probation officers that do interventions there in the office.
So when you say you're diverting a lot of those, what, 30, 40, 50%, 60, 70? How you, because what happened before? Were the schools coming and then it was just fine, we'll take them?
Well, this man to my right a few years ago challenged us as, I was deputy director. He said, your diversion numbers don't look so good. So we took a
Okay, the diversion numbers don't look so good, meaning they're too high or too low?
Too low.
Got it.
Too low. So I don't know the exact number, and I won't tell you directly, but I would venture to say that far more than 50, 60% of all school complaints are diverted. And what we've done most recently in the legislature is disorderly conduct is going out the window. And that's subjective with policy.
So schools come to you and say, this kid has disorderly conduct, and they want you to do something about it?
Right, and disorderly, again, is subjective. You roll your eyes, you're disorderly.
Facts. In the Department of Juvenile Justice, schools are really coming to you with disorderly conduct, which means a young kid got an attitude.
A large percentage of those complaints were for disorderly conduct.
Wow.
If it meets a criminal statute for something else, we will screen it and determine probable cause for it to be linked to an act. But disorderly conduct is one of those that we have significantly and increasingly been diverting, and now the legislature is addressing that as well.
Jonathan, this is the thing that is, people might be watching, they might think it's granular, but this is actually the problem.
Yes.
That you have to break this thing down that small, because that's what really creates a larger problem, because they also, you go across the country, in most prison systems, 90% of the people who are housed in prisons are also illiterate. Well, hell, you keep getting kicked out of school, it's good bet you're not going to be learning. So that's the thing that it is amazing when we talk about this discussion, how oftentimes the school piece gets left out when that really is a contributing factor. Go ahead.
Right, well, I don't know how you get to the standpoint that you look at a child 6 years of age and have to do a threat assessment. I think if you see, that's projecting, if you see everything as a problem and all you have is a hammer, everything requires, everything's a nail, you can every problem be fixed with a hammer. That we don't have problem children, we have children with problems. Our children are like any other race's problems. But the problem is, we aren't given any of the care, the compassion, the love, and the consideration. If I see a 6-year-old child that's had a problem, and they are acting insubordinate, or if you say they're having a tantrum, I'm first suspecting child abuse. I'm secondly suspecting they're hungry. I'm thirdly suspecting there's something that's going in there that they cannot have any homeostasis and reach a calm. That's not normal behavior. But if the instinct of the police, the prosecutor, the judge, and the principal is to arrest that child, they need to be fired because they're not meant to work with children. Children, all children have problems. So I'm not letting that escape us. Our children are going to have problems. And I would say, lastly, in having the right frame of mind, Roland, you have to get your child prepared for school. But the society has to make sure the school is prepared for the child. One example of that is if the child's clothes smell, there has to be an option to get the child some clothes washed in there where they can keep their humanity, their dignity, and their pride. So when you're going into high poverty neighborhoods, you also have to address the needs that your child's going to have before they begin to feel inadequate. I learned in teaching when the child says, I don't know, and this is boring to me, they're also saying, I don't understand it. It's child speak. When the parents separate, they go through divorce. The biggest victim of the divorce is the child. They blame themselves. So I would like to see us go back in a different direction to affirm the humanity in these children before we look at them as adults and criminalize them and prosecute them. And the law enforcement has a major decision they can make on the spot. You remember it used to be called weed and reefer? When they said blacks were doing it, and now it's the cannabis industry. All these children that have these cases should have them expunged immediately.
I remember seeing the story, and it was a principal in Newark, New Jersey. He actually installed a laundromat in the school because there were students who were being bullied because their clothes smelled. And he allowed them to be able to come to school before, wash and dry their clothes, and so their clothes wouldn't smell. That's how that principal actually dealt with that issue until he got over it.
Thank you, Roland. And actually, can I say, that's actually done right here in Richmond, too. I went to a high school, John Thomas High School, that was the exact same thing. And this one I wanted to know, with the principal going on to high school, and the and so we have people who are doing extraordinary things with very little resources.
Yes, sir.
And let me just quickly level set on the school prison pipeline discussion. I think we've had some very, very good comments. Virginia is #1 in the nation in the school prison pipeline. We are referring more kids to the criminal justice system for street-based infractions than any other state in the United States of America, and it's not even close. We are nearly 3 times the national average. And what I want to tell people is that to believe that that's okay, to believe that's fine, and it's just our kids are behaving poorly, we're making the right decisions along the way, you would have to believe that our kids in the Commonwealth of Virginia are worse than kids in 49 other states in the United States of America. And that's simply not the case. Our policies are. And so what we've got to do in this 400-year moment is dig very deeply and look at the root causes of these issues. Part of this is a bias of perception and a racism issue, Jonathan. You are absolutely right. And we've got to be very honest in that conversation about how we change that. School counselors are a big part of that. Along with governor, we put forth the most aggressive budget in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We put $1.2 billion into our K-12 education, $99 million specifically for school counselors, which is that 1 to 250 ratio. We need people who are trained in these schools to deal with these children and are culturally competent, who understand where these kids come from. Who understand that I have both a son and a daughter, both African American. My daughter, I know how to interact with her, but a teacher may not. And so I don't want her behavior to be perceived in a way that's not intended. And it happens all too often, particularly like girls. They are treated and criminalized for behavior that we understand very differently in our culture. And so I think that's got to be dealt with. But what I want to say, particularly when it comes to our youth, is that we also have to, as Jonathan said, reaffirm their dignity and change the way in which we set expectations for their lives. You talk about working backwards. I went to a juvenile justice facility on Christmas Day this past Christmas, and I had tired of my family, but then I left them to go be with these kids. And when you walk into this facility, this is in Fairfax County where we live, you walk into this facility, it was very different. 30 minutes into it, when I first got there, these kids were angry. They were upset, they were surprised, they had no idea who Lieutenant Governor was. Why would you come to be with us on Christmas? No one else was visiting them. Families were out there, the administrators were doing a great job. By the time we spent about 30 minutes together, and we just talked, I treated them as human beings. I asked them about their families, their siblings, where do you come from? What were your dreams? Where are hopes? Right? There were two questions I always asked kids. One we asked since they were children. What do you want to be? Right? We always ignore that question growing up. What do you want to be? But I maintain as important as that question is, it's not the most important question. The most important question is, who do you want to be? Because once you give them the power to control whether or not they're more compassionate in this moment, whether or not they are treating others with the same dignity they want for themselves, their eyes light up, and that pilot light in their spirit comes back alive. And they were hugging me by the end of that. They were asking me about what I do, can I do what you do, and how do you think, our futures could be different. And so we have got to reaffirm the humanity and the dignity of these young people. These are not inmates. These are not criminals. These are not prisoners. These are people. And these are our children. And so once we start from that premise and have policies and resources to back that up, then we're going to start to see the changes that we want to see in our community.
We'll go down real quick and then we'll go on there.
95% of all the children in the deep end of our system have experienced an adverse childhood experience.
Okay, hold on. What is the end of our system? What is that?
Committed to state care.
Got it.
Committed to state care, of the less than 350, they've had an adverse childhood experience. That's a significant trauma, abuse, neglect, parents dying, something really traumatic has happened. 65% of them have had at least 3. We need to be mindful of that, and these are the young people in our schools. So one of the things that we don't have state EOE.
Okay, how do you have to get to 3? They're being assessed.
We're assessing them. We're
Okay.
assessing them.
So are they being assessed in school?
Schools are here. I don't speak in schools, but what I will tell you that
Okay. All I know is the school are being assessed in school.
Yeah. But let me say this, the schools division, the Commonwealth has redone their whole code of conduct within the last year, because we participated in that. So I know the schools are trying to address it. I can't say whether or not they're assessing. I know that we have the ability to help them with that. And one of the things that they are
Hold on. That's not perfect. We have the ability to help them with that. Are they asking for your help?
Some of them, I don't know the local school divisions. At the state level, they did ask for our help working on this code of conduct. The other thing that many divisions are implementing now is something called PBIS, that stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. And through PBIS, that's one of those avenues you asked earlier, can you take a kid off to a calming room? That's one of the things that does occur. We have one remaining large juvenile correctional center. Many of you know we're trying to close that and move to smaller, more therapeutic environments. But in that one, even our teachers take kids off to calm down when they're acting out in school.
Okay, but I gotta go back.
So that's an intervention
I
there.
gotta go back because again, I hear everything and I naturally propose and stuff. Okay. So you have an assessment system where they come into your system. So you have identified 1 to 3 traumatic experiences. Does the school system have one?
Communities in Virginia have it through the Children's Services Act. The school can access it through that.
Is it mandatory?
No.
Is yours mandatory?
Yes.
Okay, so this is my point. So we have a mandatory assessment on the DE, but no mandatory assessment on the front end. So maybe in Virginia, if I have a mandatory assessment on the front end, I ain't gonna have a problem on the DE. So y'all got it in place.
We put it on the front end of our system.
No, I'm not criticizing you.
I want to make sure.
Come on, I got it. Trust me, I got it. I'm good. But the front end of your system is the back end. And so if you had a mandatory assessment on the front end, then a school understands, to Jonathan's point, I now know if you've been sexually abused, or physically abused, or mentally abused. So now I know how to deal with you to Kalia's point, because if I don't know any of that stuff, I would look at you going, this kid is crazy. So you need to have that level of sensitivity. Go ahead, continue, and then I'm going to
I want Dr. Carter to jump in, but I think that was a 400-year moment right there. So we're going to do what I value and the secretary, the directors, and the leaders together. We're going to try to have a mandatory assessment of the front end and the I'm going to do it going forward.
Thank you. I did want to say, it was, I don't want to say disgusting, but no one is ever even questioning how horrible it is to psychologically prepare your children, your black children, to have police officers telling you what to do. So we're saying it's a school resource officer, but all it is we're preparing you to go to jail and you to let your children tell you what to do and how to do it. And so for us to go into it saying, oh, this is to protect these kids because of this person is just like a big bear and then a mall, a little white guy to, whatever teacher. Okay, that's one thing, we can focus on protection, but from a psychological perspective, the assessment should be done from the beginning because we already know that they are going to have inherent traumas because they don't have the resources to survive. Right. When you don't have survival, when you have broken homes because of necessity of survival, you often get paid more if you're getting state benefits, not even have an intact family. So if you have a system that just recreates, as you said, slavery, because back then they're taking away the black husbands to rape the women. So all this is a perpetuation that we are now socializing and getting funding for so that you can get your state benefits and get your check at the beginning of the month. So we need to actually start from the beginning when we're doing this 400, the next 400 years, let's make it okay to do a do-over. We mess up everything. Racism is what started everything and perpetuating the inequities that continue and persist in all of our black communities at a higher level than any other community, and then it starts with them being inside school. And when you're inside the schools, like the resources, I think like as you said, Jonathan, it actually communicates to you that you are not worthy of resources. We don't need to teach you because you didn't go to jail anyway. Here's already officer so-and-so over here to get you ready for that. We need to actually start from the beginning, is what is the best for this little person to recognize that they can be a child and can enjoy childhood and have resources to help them overcome the traumas, the ACEs that they are experiencing at a higher rate that will then prevent them from even getting into this facility.
So, before I haven't done more questions. Now, because what happens, a lot of times happens with panel. We talk about, we diagnose problems and then it's all over. I'm always about, okay, but this is what I need. Like, when I meet with my staff, I go, okay, what do y'all need? Do we need paper? Do we need ink? Like what do we need? Because I don't know what to go buy. Okay? So, Sharon, we'll start with you. When you look at this whole issue of mass incarceration, criminal justice reform, before and after, what are one or two things that you need to be done, that you want to be done? Now, whether that's local, whether that's school district, whether that's county, whether it's state, doesn't matter. What do you need to be done? What do you want to be done?
As far as what should be done,
What do you need to do?
what I need in order to make sure that we can put a better person back into society, because we've been given this person to deal with once they're here. We need the resources, we need the people and the connections that we can put in place for individuals when they go back out and can be able to do the right thing because they're put in a position to be able to do the right thing.
And when you say those things, those resources, housing, education, employment.
Housing, education, employment, and transportation, food, it's where you live, how you live, and how you're going to be able to get to the position that you need to get to in order to do that. Right now, we have a program that we're working on to ensure that we are connected to the right people to get houses for individuals. However, you're putting people in those houses that are dope infected, that are sexual assault impacted. So we're putting people in houses because there are a lot of people that are making these houses available that are just doing it to get the funds for themselves, and they're not really, not able to be able to prepare the people to be able to move into a better transition into a home or to a job.
So really the leaving a place is actually better than where they're going.
Right. We need better facilities to send people to.
Got it.
We need funding to do that. We're always in a position here that we don't have the money to do certain things because we're just supposed to house them. And I'm not into housing people. This is not a warehouse. This is a place to build people and to get people. And we have to have the funds in order to do that. We have to go out and search for all these grants and do all these things to put people in a position where if you get out and they still tell you, you're out of a record, so you can't do anything. So we need the resources to give people housing, to be able to give them, put them in a position to get good jobs, they have to want those jobs. You know, having jobs out there available and having people that have some skill level to be able to do them is a different thing. So we're building out individuals now in our facility, not waiting until they go to DOC, but trying to get them to be able to drive a tractor trailer, to be able to run a forklift, to be able to borrow somebody's hair, to be able to do artwork, to do all those things.
Providing skill sets.
Providing skill sets for them, as well as we're trying to build their mental health, as well as their physical health and their emotional health. We need the financial resources in order to do that, but I need the staff to be able to do it. Because we're asking our officers to be nurses. We're asking our officers to be parents. Because the education that they don't get before they get incarcerated, we have to test people from 18 to 25 to find out what their educational level is. That's on us. We're telling the individuals that if you don't get education out there, you get one in here. Again, yes, the assessment is going to happen
We need basically the same thing. We need resources in the community that will continue the treatment, programming that they're getting while incarcerated. We need mental health services in the community. Today, we are the largest de facto mental health institution in the Commonwealth. 30% of those with us incarcerated have a mental health diagnosis. And so that's a major problem. And we were having a very hard time. We still are, getting them placed in the community when they're ready to transition out. So I went to the secretary a few years ago and laid this problem out. And the secretary worked with the governor, were very instrumental in helping us to get some resources. We got several resources, millions of dollars, to get mental health practitioners in the community, but it's not enough still. It's still not enough.
Okay, fine. When I say what do you need, I'm asking what do you need? You think got several million. What do you need? 25? 30? No. The reason I'm getting is because you have people in the community who want to deal with problems. They need to be able to say, nah, he needs resources. They don't need to go to the state legislators and say, he needs $38 million for mental health services. And so the community needs to know what your ask is. So when you get ready to ask, then they're not able to go ask for what you're trying to get. What's the number? So for the rest of y'all, when I'm asking you what you need, that's what I'm trying to get at. Because they need to know what to fight for. If they don't know if it's a general fight, they can't fight for it. Well, what do you think I need? I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. No, I'm dead serious because here's the big one. I live in all over the country. The biggest problem with discussions like this is that we have general discussions and we don't leave something for the people who are attending to be able to take and say, okay, so for instance, Shannon, I'm going to come to you. You said we have this facility that is absolutely run down hard. As you were talking, I immediately thought of Parkland Prison, Mississippi, where we had 15 people who actually died. And so you can't put people in dilapidated level of facility. I don't want to go to prisons, but if it sounds that bad, I can imagine how it looks. Someone has to say, yo, we need a much better facility to be able to really somebody. And so that's one of the things that John can go. What do you think, what's the need? What do you need?
Number one, we have to deal with false allegations that are asserted against African-American men. There's a long list, but start at the top, what a false allegation can do. When there is a dispute between what the officer said he saw versus what might have happened. And then, thank God there are more cameras out here now. When someone goes from wanting to testify to testifying and ends up with a conviction, and now once you get out, you still have the stain on you. So number one.
That's why I believe that the police officers are not putting a body camera on or a dash cam on, that's the automatic fire. So how is this doing? You turn your camera on, audio and video, and dash cam, and if you don't, you're gone.
And I would say equally respectfully, the officers, I give them the benefit of the doubt on so many things, like they're shooting everywhere in Biloxi, Mississippi, Chicago.
Right.
So I want them to get back to their family, I respect that. But there's only a few, and police departments have proven over time, they do not root out their few bad officers.
Right.
So we need to help them gain some courage just to get the few that are bad that are out. The second one, we need to make sure we have access to due process. That's the 14th Amendment. We are oftentimes convicted first in the press, and then once you're dead, 7 years later, they say here's an exoneration. You can keep that exoneration 70 years later. We're not given the benefit of the doubt. We're first found guilty.
Right.
If the white man tells a lie, he's believable. If the black man tells the truth, it's questionable. We need to actually, and the third part I would make is we have to have the public defenders funding at the same level of the prosecutors. We're not coming up on the back of the poor to get to this office, to get to that office, to get to that office, having warehousing, throwing away so many lives. You let's look at the people that are coming up off the backs of the poor, and the public defender's office, the government should respond to that.
Right.
You should have actually same level of resources to prove your innocence as you would have to.
He raises an absolutely good point, because our criminal justice system is an adversarial system. And if you have a better trained prosecutor and a less trained defense attorney, you know what the outcome's going to be. So making sure we have professional public defenders, pro-bono attorneys is absolutely essential, and I'm just pleased he raised it because it does give me an opportunity to say Governor Northam put more money into the budget to hire, I think it's 57 more public defenders. We're also going to create a new public defender's office in Prince William County, which is a very large and growing county in the Commonwealth. So couldn't agree more with the gentleman. Several years ago, we did create an indigent defense commission so that we can professionalize our public defenders, because Colette's office and Shannon's office are professional. They're long-term prosecutors. They go to continuing legal education. The other side of the defense has to have the same training and professionalism. Make sure you have an equitable outcome.
I see everything. She had a wife in your age.
You never know which one is going to drink. And the second reason is because I just said this to the governor, and I applaud my new friend here for saying what he said. I'm in Henrico County, one of the 5th largest county in this Commonwealth, one of the most economically sound, and I'm very, very proud of what Henrico County does with economic development and what resources that we have. We do not have a public defender's office. Neither is there one in Chesterfield County. And don't even think about what's happening down in Southwest. It's taking 2 hours to get one of those. We do not have a public defender's office in Henrico County. Court appointed, who, a lot of these people are my friends, they get paid $450 for a felony. If they spend 10 minutes or 10 hours, they get paid $450. They get paid $120 for a misdemeanor. Again, whether you spend 15 minutes or 15 hours. We have been doing public safety on the cheap in the Commonwealth of Virginia for too long. And I'm coming from the prosecutor, and I realize that, my profession, we've been vilified, and rightfully so in certain circumstances. I like to think, and I think that this McKeach and I, that we're trying to do the right thing. But it is true. When you are spending 20 minutes with your client, you have no meaningful dialogue to know what's going on, what was going on in their life, what do they need? Because even if they did steal that Snickers bar from 7-Eleven, I don't care whatever it is, you've got to ask yourself, why did Mr. Smith do that? And what can we do to make sure that Mr. Smith is not confronted with that proverbial bat and fork in the road of the good decision, bad decision? And what can we do? But you've got to have people who are going to be paid to spend the time with their clients to do the right thing. And then take it to the next level.
So you want a mandatory public defender's office in each county in the Commonwealth?
Sure, and it costs $500 million, I don't care. Public defender's offices have mitigation experts, they have their own investigators that can help their attorneys. Because I get it, you don't necessarily want to trust a law enforcement officer all the time. Even if they've got the body here and they've got the reports, but maybe you just want a little extra comfort. I get that. On top of that, you want to... Yeah, the idea being is that not only do we need to be, because you're going to have court-appointed lawyers, they're not going to go without jobs because public defender's offices have conflicts, right? And we've got to recognize that in this Commonwealth, in some of our counties, our poorest counties, with 20,000 people, 10,000 people, someone told me one of the counties was getting ready to file bankruptcy down in Carroll County. In that area, like New River Valley Regional Jail, a county is going to file bankruptcy. What kind of resources are you going to have out there? None. But this whole idea about making sure, because first of all, we want to make sure if someone is accused of a crime, they actually did it. I mean, that is due process right there. And you've got to have people on both sides, prosecutors and defense attorneys, who are willing and want to, you got two of us right here, that want to do the right thing and are willing to make sure that the right thing is going to happen.
As a professor, I would advocate for the state of Virginia to have a decarceration policy and program. I'm advocating for a decarceration policy and program, and that would mean an investment in developing social capital. For example, many of brothers and sisters who exit prison or correctional facilities have skills, and put them in charge, be able to use their skill sets and their experiences in community programs, in community agencies. I think we're missing a vital component in our community. I think also we need to invest more in healthy marriage programs, in male development programs, in female development programs, and they've got to be African-centered. They've got to be culturally centered programs to develop people after they've been in the traumatic situation of being locked up. And then finally, HBCUs need more state funding. We're 100 years behind the 8 ball in Virginia because Virginia is Alabama with a suit on. We're 100 years behind. And so an example would be Norfolk. Norfolk public schools are struggling to educate poor children. You have ODU in Norfolk, you have NSU in Norfolk, and nobody is talking to anybody. And so those are examples. That's the ask.
Gotcha. Renee, what's your ask?
I would say to, again, start from the beginning. Every police force, every military branch attracts a certain personality, and that same goes with police officers. So people who are going to have control and authority issues are bound to be in the police industry. So I would recommend for each police officer to be screened with an assessment for authority control and the MMPI. Minnesota Multiple Personality Disorder can actually assess who will abuse authority when given.
My ask is prevention programs in every community and every neighborhood in the Commonwealth that are responsive to the individuals in that community. We have lost $20 million in our Virginia Community Crime Control Act over the last 15, 20 years. We once had 30 million, we're down to 10. We've lost officers on youth, and nobody truly knows.
You have 30 million in what?
30 million in the Virginia Community Crime Control Act.
And now you're down to 10.
And
what did that act do?
That act allows for each community to build an array of services that addresses needs in those particular communities.
So what you want is for folks here to put take that back to previous level, 40 million or even higher.
Take that back in or restore offices on youth or something similar to that are locally based that address the needs of those communities at the community level.
All right. Harold, what's your number?
My number is going to be about $40 million.
For those mental services.
But
Mental health services.
mental services, but before mental services, the ask is to allow us to create more dedicated reentry centers. Today we have 16.
It's 16 ways.
We have 16 across the state, 4 in the DOC.
How many do you need?
We need to double that number.
Got it. Brian, what's your ask? First of all, earlier you talked about where the money was shifted away from one program to the other. I think it was like 400.
Yeah, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble with the legislature, because I think the legislature is going to restore that. I think the school council. I want to give a shout out, and then you didn't bring my camera to their faces. I own my damn camera. There have been a number of resources. We're doing a lot of catching up. And like I said, we really have, and there's a lot of catching up to do, as you've heard here tonight. And I think that Governor Northam is finding resources and putting them into a lot of education in particular. 38% of all new spending for the governor's budget was for education. So,
Well, we need an assessment in education.
I heard you,
Yes.
yes, on the assessment, we're gonna look into that. That's just what I wanted, really. Harold, our Department of Corrections should not be the largest mental health institution.
Precisely.
It really is early, I get back to my initial comments about early intervention. We gotta stop, whether it's marijuana or larceny or some of these petty offenses. It has cascading effects. Felonizing certain conduct, whether employment, housing, education, is cascading effects. So early intervention, Roland, really, again, every year we go through this, we ask for more money for Harold, and Valerie, who's done a great job. We had 2 adult, deep end as we're referring to it now. We closed one, but we kept that money, thanks to the legislature. We kept that money and put it into community services. So now we have one facility, and it's just over 200 kids. It goes from anywhere from 199 to like 205. Again, though, it's too many kids. If we can, I don't want the mental health services, the substance disorder, having to be applied or implemented in Harold's facilities. They should be back in the community. Early intervention.
Right, so the reason I keep going back to that point is because, again, what often happens is, folks say to DC, this is what we need, states go to DC. And then when the state, county, or cities, they go to the state. What this is also about is also letting this audience know, they didn't have to leave here, go to a school board, go to the city, then go to the county, and then say, we need you to institute these on your level, because if you don't, they will always end up at the state. So when I keep talking about what's at the end, the state, you're actually at the end. So we have to keep going back, state's the end, county, city, school district, and so school district actually is on the front end of all of this, because they're technically at the age of 5 or so. And so the function order for people here is not just to go to the state capitol saying we need this. It's to actually take these exact same asks and then go to their county, city, school board, and then say, we need you to implement these, and we'll allocate and we'll adjust your budget. Real quick? Yes. Go ahead and go to questions.
All right, thanks, Roland. I will be very quick, and you're asking exactly the right question. What do you need? Let me just take a quick list, and you can write these down, and we need you to get behind these to make these happen. Let me talk on the back end really quickly. Once you're in the justice system, we need to abolish the death penalty in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think we need to get rid of it. You see a simple control laws, or the simple facial violence, and the violence, we should completely ban it, and we will need your help to do that. We need to make expungements easier on records for juveniles and for adults in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We do need to have a public defender's office in every county or every jurisdiction in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We also need conviction integrity units. And these have popped up around the country. Give you one example, in Philadelphia, District Attorney Krasner has implemented a conviction integrity unit which tests whether or not a crime was actually committed, whether or not when someone is alleged to have done something, whether it actually happened. They have freed, just in the last couple of years, 12 people exonerated who never did what they were accused of doing. And so these are people in some cases who have sat in prisons for decades. And we need to be a Commonwealth that changes that entire trajectory. I can't tell you, Roland, almost a week doesn't go by that I'm in the Senate presiding, and someone's out in the gallery who spent 30 years in prison for something they've been accused of doing, were exonerated and lost their lives behind it. Well, that can no longer happen in the Commonwealth of Virginia or in this country. And let me just very quickly, 3 quick items on the front end. We need to have a summer job guarantee to every youth in the Commonwealth of Virginia. My first job in Washington, D.C. was under Marion Barry, the D.C. Summer Work Program. We guarantee a job for every single young person and family to the government of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Let me say this, there should be no school, elementary, middle, or high school that's more than 100 years old. We should go down the Commonwealth and rebuild every single school that is finding itself in that dilapidated condition, including technology. And we should use a local workforce, including people who are re-entering society, to help rebuild those schools, to help rebuild their lives. And the final thing that I'll say, and we talked about the front-end assessments being guaranteed, I think that we need to invest in our HBCUs. We have 5 of the most extraordinary HBCUs in the country right here. I will say this, in this budget, we put record investment, secretary, and our directors, $300 million for our public HBCUs, Virginia State and Norfolk State, for the first time in history that we put that kind of funding behind HBCUs. And that's what we need to do right now and going forward in this 400 years.
All right, so this is how we're going to handle questions, okay? First and foremost, I don't need you holding the mic. I got it. Okay? Keep your hands in your pocket, put them behind your back. If you touch the mic, I'm going to hit your hand with the mic. Just be real clear. Any questions, not sermonettes. If you go long, I'm cutting you off. Okay? All right? I'm gonna take questions. Again, this side, middle, that side, and I'm coming back, middle, that side. All right? Now, we're supposed to end at 6. We're gonna go a little over that. So we're gonna go through questions. Okay? So what I'm gonna do is start anyone on this side with the question. You know, on this side with the question. No, I'm going to say, see, you wait, no, baby, just the middle, I got this. I need you to breathe, I need you to breathe. I got you. And the first time I've done this, stand up. All right, stand up. Name, where you from, what's your question?
I'm from Newport News, Virginia, and I'm a community activist working in this state. And it's not so much as I'm going to ask it as a question.
Yes, you are.
How about you all work with grassroots community activists? We're out here, we can help you all, but you all keep turning your back on us.
Okay. Hold on, that's the first thing you said. Why don't you work with us, you turn your back? Okay. How? What does that mean?
So we come to these things all the time. We go and have conversations with our legislators and people in these departments. Either, especially with prisons, because prisoners are contacting us and telling us what happened. When we come to, like Harold Clark for once, they don't believe us. They discredit what we're bringing to them, and so problems don't get solved. Okay. And they need us.
So the question is, for juvenile or public records, we will have a very specific initiative that engages grassroots organizations.
It's growing, isn't it, Paul?
Who's Paul? Where's Paul? Who's Paul? No, I need to know. Okay, tell me it's growing is our answer. So, what is growing?
Nothing.
No, put your hand on it. No. So, I want to know again, so what is growing? What is that?
Last time I had my hands out, they put them behind my back. Alright, so we had an intentional conversation with Valerie the other day about some possibilities, but I have conversations all the time. So I've adopted a motto of I shall see, but I like to say something real quick if I can. everybody in here had the luxury or the opportunity to see Weinstein's movie, right?
Yes, Nancy, not yet. It's still in theaters, right?
Okay, so if you read the book, one of the things that I noticed that was not in the movie was one of his constituents that told him about capital punishment. And now, I'm not talking about just the death penalty, because we know about that. But he said, if you have no capital, then you shall be punished. The true meaning of it. So, what they were saying about those resources for public defenders, it has to be warranted. And the last thing, Mr. Irvin, when you run? Yeah, we won't vote for you.
But I still need my question. Is there a specific program that engages grassroots organizations when it comes to the Department of Corrections, when it comes to the Department of Juvenile Justice?
So the Department of Juvenile Justice, we are developing one. It's a family engagement and a community engagement initiative.
And you're developing this community engagement initiative, who are you developing it with?
Some of these partners in the room that I have met with and continue to meet with around the Commonwealth.
Okay, when are you going to pass this through?
Can I speak? Can I say something?
That's fine. I'm not picking anybody, but on the same level, the reality is the same thing with the sheriff. The sheriff says, this is what I need from the community, there has to be a formal program. So the same thing with the attorney. Has to be a formal program, so when the group says, hey, we want to help, then it's talk to that person who's responsible for community engagement. So if it doesn't exist, I need to know when it exists, because the purpose is here. If it doesn't exist, it's a waste of time having these events where people are saying they want to engage, but they have no place to go to become engaged.
We have many partners from the community that are working with us within the DOC. We don't have something that's a formal program per se, but we get contacted by universities, by colleges, by others, and they have a proposal, they have an idea, we invite them in.
So here's my suggestion. What you actually need is an actual formal process. And you can say, here is our Department of Corrections grassroots initiative. And that means that the point person who folks will need to reach out to, and then because if they have those ideas, you may have a group out here who says, hey, we already have employers who are willing to give those jobs, but if it's not coordinated, then frankly, no one here knows who to email, who to call, who to reach out to. So it has to be formalized to the governor or whatever.
Okay, let me say this, and it's exactly right, and the right question. Two things. To be very precise and specific, I will work with the directors, with the Secretary, with the Governor. We will have a pilot program with pilot funding in place this year. Okay? So that's a very good question. All right, and we work out details. So that's one thing. The second thing, and this is very important, and this is why I wanted to convene this incredible group of people, of activists and folks in the community, and I see community podiums with the shout around, and also Gary Flowers, who are there with champions in this regard, and I have to recognize him. But this is exactly why I wanted to convene this group together, because for too long, we get stuck in the last 400 years mentality, right? Because you're absolutely right. I'm sure there are things that have not worked, right? That we've come to people, we've had discussions, we've had conversations, we have forums, we have summits, and everyone leaves, and they say, well, what do we do now? And a year goes by, and we're having the same forum, the same summit. This is supposed to be different. That's what we call this the next 400-year summit. I want to take the frustration, I want to take the things that have not worked in the past, and let's try something new and different in this first year of the next 400 years. Let's get to a different place. And I believe we can do it if we work together and operate in that spirit, put resources behind it, be very intentional about it. But there's too much at stake for our communities and for our people for us to get locked down with the frustrations of the past. And so I'm calling everyone to the better angels of our nation. I'm calling everyone to hold everybody else accountable, myself included, because our children cannot afford for us to fail in this regard. We have failed as a system for way too long. It is now time for us to succeed. And we can do this in the right spirit, with the right attitude, with all the passion we have for our kids and our grandkids. Let's put into these solutions. that we're going to have today. So you will, in the next year, have a pilot program to deal with grassroots around the state, but I want your partnership, and I want your promise that we're going to do this together. Okay? Questions?
Hi, my name is Roland. I'm the president of the TERP, Forensic Peer Support Recovery, and my question is, what will be done for the paraphernalia charges? I'm a returning citizen, and I was given a felony conviction for paraphernalia that was clean.
Who can answer that? Governor? Who can answer that?
And that's in way with everything else we've been talking about. And that's under a different code section. That's under the 56.2 paraphernalia part, or was it under the? Here's the reality. We're talking about how we got to start over and give people the clean slate, and that's just one more thing that we just need to talk about and add that to the rest of things we want to do.
We need to reduce the number of felonies in our criminal code, and particularly for things that are non-violent offenses. Your life should not be impacted forever because of something like paraphernalia in that case that you described. Again,
What the hell is paraphernalia?
That's a legislative fix that we need to work with you on. So come see our
Question?
I grew up in Richmond City too. I grew up in all the projects, Mosley, Wickham, Fairfield, Gibson, whatever. I made straight A's. I didn't let that bother me or whatever. I think we need to add people up here. We need to add people like my mother, a single mother raising 2 black guys, to answer questions about what to go through. We need to have the police people up here who letting the troopers that worked a long time work in short pump and not at East End. They started the troopers in Henrico in East End because they knew there would be a lot of black people. They started out there because they were aggressive. We need to have police people up here that's going to answer those questions. Why don't we have the people that's, and I work for the Department of Corrections. I get frustrated when people say Department of Corrections put people in prison. No, the judges put people in prison. The judges do charges. So why don't we have the judges up here? Why don't we have the single parents up here? And why don't we have police up here answering the questions as well?
I'll answer because it's why. This is public policy. A parent is not a public policy official. A single mother cannot drive public policy.
Yes, we can.
No. Listen to me clear. The Department of Corrections, the Department of Juvenile Justice, Secretary of Homeland Security, you have Lieutenant Governor, DA, Sheriff. That's public policy. If you have folks to report, and that's fine, what that ends up being is an anecdotal conversation. It's not private policy. And so if you look at the room, well, raise your hand if you have a graphic organization. Wow. Organization, drive public policy, and also driving it. And so it's great to have an anecdotal conversation, but you have to have people who then will say, okay, that's why I asked, what was the ask?
But we have state agencies all around that handle graduate organizations.
Right.
They don't go to the Department of Corrections. Go to the organization that handle
No.
organization. They can handle that better.
But here's the point though, if you don't know where to go, if you don't know what the ask is, then you have no idea what you're trying to get. And so what you've already heard here is, you've heard in terms of specifically what was happening with public defenders. That's also state and that's also local. And so that's the key state. Here's the deal. It's not people on the stage. If you add 3 or 4 or 5, then 14 people talking, so you have to narrow down what the focus is of the panel, and that's what this is about. A public policy-driven conversation. How do you bring grassroots people, community people, change public policy in order to make it better? I gotta go to the question right here.
But criminal justice, you need people that's being criminalized.
Okay.
No. Not the people that's going to.
No, that's a separate panel. But you can't have 30 people on a panel. You can have 3 different forums. But one forum does not solve every voice on any issue. This was specific words,
Hi, my name is Marcia Williams. I'm the founder of Seal College and Career Review. My question is twofold. One is based on trafficking, homelessness and children that are aging out of foster care. Too often I'm exposed and I'm being called to help young people who are on the street. They're 18 or older, and the police said they haven't committed a crime, we can't pick them up, but they're on the street. They're exposed to substance abuse, sex trafficking, homelessness, and there's no policies or no solutions or resources made available. So what does a grassroots person like myself do? One, to help them, and two, how do we get access to funding so that we can increase the scope of our programs to more effectively help these young people?
Thank you so much for your question, sister. And I've said repeatedly that there is not enough state funding going to community programs and grassroots programs. There is a disconnect between what happens at the community level, and oftentimes at the community level, the community is providing support for certain programs. But that's going to go only so far. And so, as I mentioned earlier in my remarks, there must be more funding for the community level, grassroots level programs, and we're missing that. I also want to share this, that community development block grants, which occur in the state of Virginia, typically are about business development and not about social program development, and that's another.
Hi, my name is Darryl. I'm the president of Project Give Back to Community, a non-profit organization here in the city of Richmond. I'm a returning citizen. I spent 17 and a half years in prison. My organization, for critical offenses, I didn't kill anyone.
You didn't explain yourself.
I want to first speak about the community engagement, some of the grassroots organizations. We work with the Virginia Department of Corrections. My organization will provide housing for our returning citizens that are homeless. As a matter of fact, one of our brothers here, Paul was one of our guys that stayed with us, and we helped him navigate, and he's doing very well now. So we have a bunch of guys like that. So I have to give credit to the Director Clark, and the Secretary of Public Safety. So on what they're doing, they meet with us regularly. So when we are asked to see them, within a couple of days, we sit in front of all of them to let them know what we're doing. And if they have any and this is something that bothers me and should bother everybody here. One of the reasons why our prisons are so large now, our conviction rates are so high, is the use of jailhouse snitches, right? I don't understand why you let somebody just tell you that they have information because they're in the same cell with someone, and the prosecutors give them extra time. Say, look, testify against him, you're gonna go home. That we should not do, and I want to see whether our prosecutors here can tell us what they can do differently. The second thing is this: in order to curb the incarceration, especially of our black people, we need to look at the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt. What is reasonable to you is not reasonable to me. We need to do something about that standard. It's a flimsy standard. I need to do something about it.
All right, we're going to answer that question, and we're going to go to the next question.
I'll just say real quick. I learned my lesson. I think one of the things we're going to know is that you know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. But you also know when things, you have mistakes in your life, you can learn from them moving forward. And you were talking about snitches being rampant in the federal system. My God. I mean, that, you were talking about people who were getting, 60, 89, 100 months trying to get home. I learned the hard way, you cannot rely on snitches. And so, getting back to what we do, what Colette and I do, you have to have credible, you've got to be able to rely on that evidence. If you do not believe that evidence to be credible, you cannot go forward. There has to be something else to corroborate that. And that's where you have the personalities of people like Colette and I, who are not going to go forward just because of one person saying something. There has got to be something more, because the ultimate result is the impact on the individual and taking away their liberty. So I know that Colette and I, we have a certain policy within our offices for sure. So I can talk about the snitches with respect to that.
All right, so Lieutenant Governor, we have three take questions for 10 more minutes. We're supposed to end at 6. I'm pushing to 6:20, so I'm letting you know that.
Thank you. Very quickly, I agree. We have to get back to a place where we have due process in our system. We have eliminated systematically due process and the opportunity for people to, you should never have to prove your innocence in the United States of America. it should always be the burden of proof as the other way around. And we've got so far afield from that, so we have to rely on facts and evidence and get back to a system that is reformed in a way that is fair, that if we have people who end up not being convicted because we can't meet that standard, well then that's the way the system needs to work. Because it needs to be about justice and not simply putting people in jail. And this is coming from someone who was a federal prosecutor myself. I've been a defense attorney and a federal prosecutor in the Major Crimes and Narcotics Unit, but we need a system that does justice. And too often it has not done that, and part of that is exactly what you said.
Hi, my name is Sheba Williams. I am the executive director of Roland. You guys have asked several things of us. We have the Constitution alleviates the right of a person to vote when they are convicted of a felony. I am asking that that be removed, because when you go to prison, you're automatically not voting. You should not depend on Governor McDonald, the color in Northland, to reinstate or reconcile your vote when you return. You should automatically have that right and be able to hold public office, run and serve on juries. That is the first thing.
So what is the process to change the state constitution? Is it ballot initiative? Is it, let's explain what it is. That's the only way to change it. So what is it?
It's to change the Constitution of Virginia, including to restore the right to vote, is essentially a 2 to 3 year process. You have to pass the constitutional amendment in one General Assembly session. You have to have an intervening election. You have to then pass it again in the next General Assembly session, and then you have to have a referendum statewide. So that's why it takes 2 to 3 years to reform the Constitution, and that's why, in the interim, we've had the governors restoring the rights of those who have been formerly incarcerated, because we want to make sure they get those rights. So we should begin that process to reform our Constitution, but many people weren't aware that it takes 2 to 3 years, so we have to begin that process now.
Keep in mind, when they changed the Constitution with Amendment 4 in Florida, that was a 10-year process.
That's correct, so it takes time. But I agree with you, your rights should be restored once you have paid your debt to society. But I just make one very important point on this part about voting. And this is key to a lot of what we've talked about here. We're not going to get the change we want to see unless people come out and vote. You know, the easiest way to disenfranchise people is for them to not come out and vote at all. And in the primary that we had in 2013, just to give you an example, it's pretty consistent throughout history. What do you think the percentage of voting was in the primary in 2013? I'll give you a guess. Who thinks it was above 60%? Raise your hand. Who thinks it was above 50%? Raise your hand. Who thinks it was above, State Rock, Virginia, who thinks it was above 40%? Raise your hand. Well, keep your hands up. Who thinks it was above 30%? Raise your hand. Who thinks it was above 20%? Raise your hand. Who thinks it was above 10%? Raise your hand. Keep your hands up. Who thinks it was above 5%? Raise your hand. Who thinks it was above 3%? Raise your hand. It was 2%. And so 98% of people, they were in the primary. 98% of people did not vote in the primary in 2014. So we need to restore people's rights to vote. We need to restore our own will to vote and come out and make sure
work, and we spend our world. There are over 4,000 nonprofit organizations in the state. They are created because something is lacking, and those corporate positions that are put in place to supposedly help us, they don't. The reason why we create what we create is because there was a need that was missing. The problem that I am asking to be addressed is, we ask for people to come home and participate and be citizens that are upstanding. They go to get jobs, housing, education, to be a part of their kids' education, to participate in simple things like field trips, and their record follows them forever. When do we make Virginia a state that is not a forever felony state, and when you serve your time, that is the end of your sentence?
We do that in this 400-year moment. That's why we're here. Because we change the way that process is gone. That's why we're all here today. So we need everybody to operate that spirit and have the resources at the state level, but that is exactly why we're here. Question?
Yeah, my name is Joaquin Shabazz. I represent Richmond, Petersburg, Hopewell, all the Tri-City areas. I represent Sussex, Surrey, all of that, all of Virginia.
You represent me who? You represent me who? That's you represent. I'm like, I don't need to make it wrong? Okay.
Right. I don't need to be in politics to represent. But this is what I want to say. I'm a former offender, right? I had a felony conviction, non-violent, non-residential burglary, okay? That burglary happened 29 years ago, back when I was an alcoholic. That burglary 29 years ago is a barrier crime that's stopping me from working in the mental health field right here. Despite my degrees, I would be $220,000 in student loan debt by the time I'm finished. But I have a barrier crime. Now it is screening, but all that whole list of barrier crimes is systemic and institutional racism. It disproportionately affects black people. Okay? So, and I'm going to tell you something else. Remember I said this today where I was recording between DMAS and DBHDS. They get ready to destroy the black mental health providers in Virginia. I'm telling you now, they're coming for the mental health agencies that are run by black people, serving black people. So remember I said this today. If nobody's regulating DMAS and DBHDS, it's going to be a problem with mental health. Okay? One more thing. I've been back in the system. I've been speaking at Augusta Correctional Center. All right? I spoke at New Kent, Jail East, Rico, and Deep Meadows. Deep Meadows used my curriculum for emotional intelligence with my permission to Mary Curry. I ain't get paid nothing for it. I'm trying to tell you, there's a lot of people doing grassroots work out there, and we are truly not being heard and represented correctly. Something got to change. Beyond it.
Yes, this is a significant problem. We talk about, talk about barrier crime. So, to your question, this actually has come up in this legislative session. It's something that we have to be very persistent about. Because these barrier crimes stop you, as you mentioned, from doing a whole bunch of things. Whether it's acquiring student loans, whether it's getting housing, whether it's operating in a certain field. And if we want to truly incentivize good citizenship, you talked about an offense that took place, I think it's 27 or 29 years ago. And you've clearly been incredibly productive with your life, and you're helping so many people. Why would we want to keep you in prison for 27 more years when you're actually in a position where you can help so many other people? And so we have got to legislatively fix that. But if you will come up to the Senate of Virginia, we'll make sure that you testify on barrier crimes, and we'll work on getting some of those eliminated.
Oh, you want, oh, my name is...
You've been delivering my question where you can answer your question.
Okay, my name is Katrina Buck. Put the thing so I can see. My name is Katrina Buck.
Katrina, look at this. Stop looking at the microphone.
My name is Katrina Buck, and I want to ask, first, I got two questions. First, I want to know, because y'all talk about the prison system is so big, I already know that because most of my family's in there. But anyway, when are they bringing back the 65%? Do I need to be asking y'all, or do I need to be going to ask somebody else?
What's 65%?
Do you know what is 65% when you do 65% of your time, Roland?
Everybody in the room don't know what 65% means. If anybody watching live stream don't know 65%, okay, but I'm asking you to clarify so everybody is on the same page with you.
Anyway, the people that, so I can clarify, when it used to be that you could do 65% of your time and then get out. So I don't know whether I need to be asking when that.
Okay, Brian, answer the question.
Hold on, I got one. In the Commonwealth, oil was abolished in 1995, and it's now, it's 85%, you do 85% of the time. So when will we reduce it to 65% of the time? And I'll tell you that the parole reform, the governor put in several parole reform bills. The legislature did. There were so many parole bills that decided to send them all to the Crime Commission, which does good work. They're going to study that whole parole reform, all of the bills. Now, we did get one bill through, which was the Fishback, and I won't get into all that, but that did pass. That's going to be the law. That's a good bill. And I should mention the other one with respect to the barrier crimes, and the Lieutenant Governor, I'll join him, whatever we can do. We've been working on that. Like I said, this was a transformative year, Roland. Things have changed significantly as of the last election. So there's a lot of opportunities now that did not exist previously. In our marijuana decriminalization bill, we do have a clean slate where anyone who has been convicted or arrested or any null cross of a prior misdemeanor will be sealed. So that will be clean. But The Crime Commission is also going to study more expungement, because there's lots of crimes out there, and we can all talk about a list of crimes that should be expunged, how many years, those sorts of discussions. So, to respond to, I do think you should feel some optimism with respect to there's going to be a whole new discussion with the Crime Commission, and now the Crime Commission will study it, make recommendations, and come before the legislature next year.
Second question.
Now I got another question, and this is.
I said something.
My God is right there, Martina. Want to know when Ms. Valerie stated that the assessment needs to be on a local level, who do we go to about the assessment on the local level?
Actually, I said that.
No, I know she said she said.
I said I was trying to get him to change his house and put it on the local level. So right now, there is no assessment on the local level. Well, Sister Woman, why do you think I asked him the question? Because I said it was going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. Let's sit down, please. One more, please. That's something we don't want to happen out of here. One more, please. One more. One more question. One more. I'm taking one more question, which is real soon. Taking one more question. So you agree? I'm trying to use my hashtag on me. Woosah. What's your question?
Thank you so much. My name is Charles Willis. I serve as Executive Director of United Communities Against Crime. Pretty much, you all have heard or seen me on TV and see what I do. I'm there to help the homicide victims. We talking about folks that are dealing with tragedy. My big question is, our group is non-profit. Matter of fact, our group is known, because we don't get no profits, we don't get anything. For you all that sit on that panel, when I deal with those homicide victims, and those mothers tell me, and those fathers tell me they don't have food, they don't have clothing to put on the suit of a little 3-year-old that was murdered, when there's a family that does just not have, when they need a hotel room to go to, I dig in my pocket. And I give and give and give. I have given till I can't give no more. I have nothing. Who up there? The city of Richmond told me, said, Mr. Willis, we want to help you, but we want you to be registered with the State Corporation Commission. I don't have no money to register with them. It costs $175. Who up there could help me from somewhere obtain $175 so we can be registered?
I'll give you the I'm going to put the last question. I got it right here. No, right here. Come on, what's the question?
I just got a couple statements.
No, not a couple statements. Over 6:45, and everybody needs to go home.
This is to Lieutenant Governor Fairfax.
Yes.
There cannot be a discussion about criminal justice reform without including ending solitary confinement. Okay? You asked about what it costs to do so. There was a bill in Virginia, 1284, and the Department of Corrections submitted an impact statement to say to end solitary confinement or to endorse this bill. It was $53 million. That's the impact statement that was submitted.
To end it.
To end it. So we need to take some money off that easy pass and put on, to help you guys with $53 million. Because we need to end solitary confinement, because not only am I'm Kimberly Jenkins Snodgrass, I'm a mother of a wrongfully convicted offender in the Department of Corrections, and I am Kimberly Jenkins Snodgrass, Chair of Interfaith Action for Human Rights. We do have a program in which we engage with Secretary Moran's office for solitary confinement.
Okay, so hold on. So to end solitary confinement, is that the legislature? Is that policy? What is that?
There has, I think the reason that bill, and I'll have to lean on you, Harold, I think that was for mental health counselors to address so that each individual who is in, has access to a mental health counselor. I think it was financially, the cost was substantial because you would have to hire so many more mental health counselors, is my recollection, and that was not in the budget and was not funded.
Okay, but again,
I will say,
is that prison policy or is it state law?
there's no state law that requires solitary confinement.
Okay, so it's prison policy. So when it comes to solitary confinement, how has there been a reduction in use of it? So there's been a reduction, so what's happening there?
It's also, let's make sure we're distinguishing punitive aspect of solitary confinement versus those individuals with mental health issues. This is just what I was hearing about our local jails, about the solitary confinement for those people who are having mental health crises, suicidal issues, two separate things.
Solitary confinement is a classification that's
It's a
classification that's used for individuals who pose danger to themselves, to staff, or to others within the agency. When I came to Virginia, there were 511 individuals in solitary confinement. I identified the fact that about 54 of those individuals went home in 2010 straight from restrictive housing or solitary confinement. These people are the worst of the worst in the system that have committed major crimes in the system. So I decided that something needs to be done differently because those people are still going home. So what we did within the department, we built a school without any additional resources at the major institution where those folks were being held. We implemented cognitive restructuring programs and a whole variety of programs. Now today, those folks are going to school, those folks are receiving mental health programming, and we are moving all of those out of restricted or solitary to replace them in a special mental health unit where they're receiving treatment and programming. And that number went from 511 to today, right about 34 individuals. For a system that has over 30,000 inmates. Okay, hold it. I'm saying it's not true. That's okay. First of all, okay, it is accurate. It is accurate. For a system with over 30,000 individuals, we have 34 individuals in long-term restrictive housing, which some folks choose to call solitary confinement. And these are people who are the worst of the worst within the system that have committed major crimes. If it wasn't for solitary confinement and the way we keep these individuals, the programming and all the things that are going on within the system could not occur because there was no control, there was no safety. And so you have to work on both ends. Now, we have others that they want to put in solitary who are low-level type violators, guys who mess up pretty much daily. And they may go in to a restricted housing status for less than 15 days and bounce right back out. But I'm speaking about long-term solitary. That has been addressed, and Virginia is leading the country in solitary confinement. The Virginia plan has been recognized by the Southern Legislative Conference. We received the award, the Star Award for Innovations in Government. We were recognized by the Obama White House, and we've been recognized by many others. Across the United States, the federal government and others are sending folks to Virginia. We have had over 15 different states.
Sending folks to study what you're doing.
To Virginia, to study what we're doing, what we started in 2010.
Okay, question.
Okay. I'm a radio announcer too, but
I'm not right now.
I know you do. But I do the same thing.
I feel we will go to a question.
But first of all, before I do my question, we were talking about the local state policy and state laws, and we were talking about the lowest percentage rate in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And in some instances, people are getting upset about where we are with the laws and the policies that are in place because people are not heading out to the polls and vote. That's problem number one in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And even with our state legislature in the Senate and in the House,
those numbers are always low every 4 years in the Commonwealth of Virginia because they're a lawmaking body. They're in session right now. So when we're talking about these changes, voting is a problem and folks not accurately filling out their census. So we're living some of the result from 2010 when just over 1 million children weren't counted in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So when we're talking about the mental health services and schools and other policies and everything that we need, it was a lack of us filling out the census. So I want to those things first. So my question is, when we're talking about the grassroots organizations and some of our lawmakers and our stakeholders up here, they're talking about, yeah, we're going to get with the stakeholders. But in the Secretary of the Commonwealth, my organization is a stakeholder. So my question to you is, instead of coming in the office, how can we advocate for you properly out in the community? For example, we do that for the Virginia Department of Corrections by doing public service announcement with inmates that are on the inside. So instead of us talking about trying to set up this meeting per se, how can we advocate for you?
All right, who wants to take that? Anybody? Anybody? He said, I'm going to get asked that. How can we help you? Anybody want to answer? All right, Sharon, answer the questions.
The best thing that you all can do for the city of Richmond Sheriff's Office is go before city council. Go before city council and stop talking about how much overtime I use to make sure we can protect the people that are here in this facility and make sure we can provide the services that we need. And go to the city council and tell them to fill the vacancies that I have so I don't have to use so much overtime. Stop calling and telling people I'm spending money that I need to spend to make sure this city is safe. That's what I need to do. I need to go to city council and tell them to find the money that I'm supposed to get so that I can hire the people that I need to hire. We're 11% or even 100% low.
That's it. That's
Go to city council, let city council know that I need more money for my staff. We're the lowest paid in this area to ensure that we can provide the service that we need. Yes, I gave them a raise because they needed one, and they're still 11% behind everybody else that works around in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing, and when you say we're not doing the job that we're supposed to be doing, that's news. So go talk to the city council, let the city council know we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. They need to do what they need to do over there.
I cover city council. I said how they work. All right, here's the deal. 30 seconds. Final comment. Get ready. We'll start first with Harry.
My 30 seconds, I'd like to go back to how you can help us. We have been asked that question before, and what we tell folks is, what would you like to do? Because we're prepared to give you all the information that you need to go back and work in the community and to help us with the powers that be.
Thank you. One thing that you can do as citizens and residents is to first decrease the voter apathy that we are speaking about. You can't get budgets for schools if you don't go out and vote and advocate for it. So start with the power that you have and the power that you are not given with the power that you take.
First of all, thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for making this a priority. While you walk through the corridors of power, you've not forgotten the charge that you were put there to keep. I would also like to say in the future, we need to see the governor in here, we need to see the U.S. senators in here. You're in a very unique position, Virginia. The Democrats control the House, the governor, every branch of government. You've got a $63 billion annual budget for 8.5 million people. I'm from Illinois. We have 13 million people, and our annual budget is $40 billion. The state of Virginia has money. So a big ask I would tell you is $100 million, put 50,000 students to work in hard-hit neighborhoods, let children earn $2,000 for the summer, and you'll see crime come down, and that's great to say.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you all for the conversation we're having this evening. I would solicit your help to continue to tell the story about how we're getting better, but also to help me keep the babies out of my system. And so let's provide more prevention programs and services, and we are trying to address grassroots organizations. Roland asked me when. I asked him on Friday. I wasn't ready to announce it, take on that task, so you kind of caught me off guard.
That's what I do.
I appreciate it. I want to thank you for that. But thank you for the dialogue, and we're going to continue to have it with communities around the Commonwealth.
Shannon?
You guys keep calling me, and I keep answering, and I just want you to keep calling me, and bring every issue to me that you keep on, and moving forward, allowing to support this regional effort that Roland and I are doing with Chesterfield on this Beyond Containment series, which is talking about all these issues we are talking about right now: housing, poverty, education, health. And let's just continue to keep moving forward together. I applaud Lieutenant Governor for putting us here out here on this table. I'm so excited with all these nationally recognized individuals up here. And let's keep this dialogue going, and let's actually make things happen.
Right where I started, I mean, this has been a transformative session because of the election in November, both in the budget and legislation. So many of you I see in those committee rooms. And you know, you've seen the changes, and so I think there is reason for great optimism. I think things have indeed changed. So we are progressing away from that F in a way that I think we all should be proud, and we have more room to come. But I know being vigilant and involved and engaged in the system can change the system for the better. So I look forward to the years ahead because I think we really have turned the corner and making transformative change.
Brothers and sisters, it's my pleasure to be here with you today. I see Church Hill, I see South Side, I see North Side. I'm so glad to be here today. I hope that we can create a concentrated database of all of the community practitioners I see here today. And I hope you will connect with the Richmond Association of Black Social Workers because they're doing some incredibly important work. And I think it's important that we have a central location where we can all be connected as a community providing services to our people. I hope also we will really advocate for a decarceration policy in the state of Virginia. I share.
Again, thank you all for coming. I just want to say that we have a long ways to go, we have a lot of work to do, but we need you all, and we need your help. So all of our partners that we have in the room here, thank you, and all of those of you all that want to be partners with us. Send us your proposals, we'll be glad to try to work with you, but we're going to do the real business. Don't just send us proposals because we're going to use our individuals as a workforce. We want to make sure that we're growing those individuals. So I thank you all for coming. Thank you, Lieutenant. It's always a pleasure. And all of you all on the panel, thank you all for coming. Mr. Martin, thank you so much.
Roland and this extraordinary panel, thank you all so much. Everyone who came out today, I think what I would ask you to do is to be fearless in this moment. You have to have courage to solve the problems that we're talking about.
Amen.
We are in an extraordinary moment in history. This was not simply a panel, this was not simply a summit. This is potentially a movement to change the course of history in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the only way that we are going to do that is if we have the courage of our ancestors. And if we stay focused on the task at hand. We get distracted every single day by nonsense. And I'm tired of it, frankly. I'm so tired of it. Leave the Richmond Sheriff alone. She's doing an extraordinary job. And even as we walk through so much of the nonsense that happens in politics, I want you all to know that I walk with my head held high, and I stay very focused on the task at hand because this is so much bigger than any one person. And I want to leave you with this. Roland, who is an extraordinary leader, I did my first interview after we got elected as Lieutenant Governor with Roland Martin, because this is a man who is leading this country to a better place. And we need his we support the work that he is doing, and I will tell you, folks have asked, well, how do you all stay focused? Why do you get up? Why do you continue this work even in the midst of people trying to tear you down with lies and with falsehoods and with nonsense? And I tell them, that we come from a God who can do all things. And my favorite scripture is Timothy, 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7. I was born in 2:17. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I need you to use your power. I need you to be fearless in this moment and to use your sound mind to free a whole bunch of people. Because God is really going to do in this moment. And my family in the Commonwealth of Virginia has been free since 1798. I learned right before I got inaugurated how my family had the last name Fairfax. They discovered in the old Fairfax County Courthouse a deed of manumission and freedom document that had freedom of great-great-great-grandfather, Simon Fairfax, from slavery in Fairfax County, Virginia, on June the 5th, 1798. My father got a copy of that document 2 days before inauguration. He gave a copy of it to me, and I saw it for the very first time in my life, 20 minutes before I walked up the steps of the Capitol on inauguration day to take the oath of office as the 41st Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so 220 years later, Simon Fairfax's great-great-great-grandson was being sworn in as the number 2 in command of the very same state where he had been enslaved. You serve a very good God. Please get this document, stay focused, keep your eye on the mission, and he will get your eye on the mission. Thank you all so much. So I'll close with this. The reason this question is more intentional like they're pushing, because what happens is, whenever these sessions take place, and again, like I said, I've done them all over the country, what often happens is a conversation in the room that does not go outside the room. You also have to have marching orders. You have to know, okay, what's next? One of the most fundamental problems when we talk about the Black freedom movement, some call it the civil rights movement, is that we spend lots of time on speeches and marches that took place, but actually not about the strategy that took place, how they were able to move from an idea to actual legislation. And so when we talk about voting, the problem with that is voting is the end of one process, but it's the beginning of another. So when people say we have to vote, which is true, but after the election, then it's, okay, then what's the process to then put pressure on the people who we either voted or who won to actually do what we said. So the reason I asked about the reason I asked about in terms of what kind of relationship we have with community grassroots organizations is because when you talk about, if the sheriff says, I need this, what she says, go before the city council, what that actually means is you must be an organized unit to say, we're going to have, so let's say there are 10 grassroots organizations here from Richmond. That means those 10 grassroots organizations to get together and say, you're going to go on this meeting, you're going to go on this meeting, you're going to go on this meeting. And all of a sudden they're having constant waves of pressure, and it's not just the few people. And so there has to be a process in actually doing it. Same thing. You're talking about, okay, you need X amount of dollars, you're going to the state capitol. The first thing is, who's over the Senate Appropriations Committee? Who's over the House Appropriations Committee? Who are the individuals who are on the committee? Then you start targeting those individuals by having a constituent from their district lead your effort and going in there, because they should not be ignoring constituents. It has to be an organized mobilization effort to actually get done. What often happens is people want these things to happen, but they then don't want to then create the plan to actually make it happen. And so leaving here, that's really has to be, you got to now decide, okay, out of all the stuff we talked about, you have to decide, okay, what's the one thing I want to work on to see happen? Not what are the 10 things I want to work on to see happen. My suggestion is you pick, as a grassroots organization, one issue of all we talked about that you want to see happen and say, I'm going to work on that one issue until it actually gets done. That's the only way it's going to happen. So now that we're done, you now have to do the work. Commitments were made, you got to make sure the commitments are followed through. Also, you then got to take it from here and then go back and mobilize your people to actually get it done. If there's anybody who's standing in your way, who's an elected official, getting it done, your job is to throw them out of the room. All right.
The food is right outside. They should be directing you all how to get to the food and, you know, it's kind of cold out there. The road fried chicken and bacon. Oh, we ready for that.
Everybody get a blue phone and we'll pay the
Want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
Hi, this is Essence Atkins, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey, yo, Peace World, what's going on? It's the Love King of R&B, Raheem Devon, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, my name is Brescia Webb, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Ow. Well, I like a nice filter usually, but we can be unfiltered.
What's going on? This is Tobias Trevelyan. And if you're ready, you are listening to and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up? I'm Lance Gross, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, this is Cheryl Lee Ralph, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, could it be any other way? Really? It's Roland Martin.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.